My name is Raymond Vian. I'm the Assistant Dean for the Kane College of the Arts, and I have the privilege of working in the painting and drawing area in our Art and Design department. I'm filling in for Dr. Gelfand today, and it's my pleasure to introduce an artist, Sam Vernon, who's going to be spending some time with you talking about her work and talking about her development as an artist. Sam has really had an interesting trajectory as an artist. She started off attending an arts school when she was in middle school. She went on to a magnet art school for her high school education. She was then admitted into Cooper Union and eventually got her master's from Yale. She's, as I'm sure she's going to share with you, has had multiple museum shows, and some of you may have heard of her. She's been on lists for the top 30 artists you should know who are under 30. I've had the privilege of spending the last couple days with her, and one of the things that I think I can say about her, as well as her artwork, is that there's a real honesty to both her and her installations, and the way she thinks about what she wants to communicate, the way she thinks about what kinds of experiences she wants her audiences to have after they leave a gallery exhibit or a museum exhibit that she puts together. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Sam Vernon.
Raymond, thank you so much for that introduction. It's been a pleasure to be here. I'm honored to be with all of you here today, and thank you to Utah State University for hosting me. I have been making art since I was a child. I'm sure many of you in the audience are in the same boat. And I was just saying earlier to a group of students in Raymond's class that because I have been making art since I was a child, my mother is a designer, my father is a painter, I could find no other career, no other profession that would be so fulfilling. So I want to talk to you all about how I arrived at the decision to be an artist, and with some autobiographical content here or there. And I also just want you to feel free to, I know that this is probably not the case always with lectures, but if something comes to you and you'd like to ask me a question as I'm talking, please feel free to, signal and I will reach you and we can have a conversation. I really want this to be a conversation between you all and I. So let's use this lecture as a way to have an exchange of ideas. At the end of this conversation, I'll also open it up to questions, and then we can continue from there. So the two photos that you see are photos taken several years apart from each other. The one on the left is a photo of myself in an incredible immersive installation that was mounted by Kara Walker. Can I get a show of hands of who knows who Kara Walker is? Okay, a lot of folks. So Kara Walker, as an artist, has been very influential to me as a young artist. Her career is very brilliant and inspiring. And when I saw this work at the Domino Factory, many of you may be familiar with it and may have seen images of it online. It was kind of a controversial piece, but when I saw this work, it was monumental, I mean, it was, the scale just blew me away. But outside of the scale, I also was thinking about myself as the viewer within that space. I was thinking of myself in relationship to the representation that Kara was portraying in this piece of the mammy and of the Sphinx, and how representation as it relates to identity and selfhood comes into play there. And then I was also thinking about how other people who may not necessarily feel that they identify with the same we'll say, background as Kara, were interacting with the piece as well. So you see, I am one in a crowd. There's a man behind me taking a photo of the piece. There were several people posing in front of the piece. I myself was so blown away by the sheer magnitude of it that I had to go back and see it to really process what was happening. I'm showing you this image because I think that it's very important for you all to know that representation as it relates to identity, socioeconomic issues, my own personal politics, is critical. And I think that Kara does that in a really interesting way in her work, that the ways in which she grapples with this content. The photo on the right is a photo of my sister with Solange. And Solange's album has had waves of effect on so many people, right? My sister and myself included, probably some of you in the audience, but my work is behind my sister and Solange. The work was at a gallery in Brooklyn called We Buy Gold, and Solange had her book release party there. The reason why I'm showing you that photo is because I, as the artist, much like Kara in this piece, was able to see who was interacting with my work and who could potentially be my audience, and how, as artists, we have a lot of control and we have a lot of capacity to be able to decide who we want to be our audience and how we want to speak to them. Raymond mentioned that I'm very invested in honesty. I would say as an extension of that, I'm very invested in integrity as it relates to how I want my audience to walk away with a feeling of hopefully inspiration and reflection of self when they encounter my work. So for those of you who are thinking about all of these questions, I want you to really hopefully walk away from this lecture with ideas about who your audience is and how they will experience your work, and what kind of feelings you want them to have, what kind of ideas and thoughts, concepts that you want them to walk away with. And I think that these two images are a perfect example of what I'm talking about. The power of, I'm not a PowerPoint person. I mean, I have a PowerPoint that I'm showing you, but I'm gonna just like hop around a little bit so that you can see a bunch of stuff. I think the power of where I am now as an artist is that I'm able to do like really scary things and on really visible platforms. And so I also want to share this Facebook Live interview that I did for the New York Times. This was probably one of the scariest things I've done. I mean, you had comments coming in. I'm just going to play this a little bit. And if the tech can just have the volume so that I can talk and the video will play at the same time, that would be great. I don't know if we're getting sound here. I'll just talk and you can look at this at your own convenience. The scary thing about doing a Facebook Live video is that I wasn't aware, but afterwards I realized that 250,000 people had watched this video on their devices, and so many comments were coming in of his former self. It was made in 1980. And so today, what I'd like to do is make a self-portrait of myself based on Kerry James Marshall's A Portrait of the Artist as a shadow of his former self.
Great. So this is one part of your process. You are a multidisciplinary
Can we lower the volume a little bit?
that uses many different types of art forms to create your pieces.
So the premise of this
So
video
you start with
is that I
illustration,
was
then what is
drawing
like your next step?
in response to Kerry
Usually
James
what I try to
Marshall's
do is tap into what's
self-portrait, which
important
is on that
to
postcard
me
there.
about the image that I'm
As I
making.
was
Does it
being
need to be just drawn?
As this is being recorded by
Should
one
there
of
be a
the
collage element involved as
fancy,
well?
handheld video things. I don't, you won't be able to see it. But taking up this opportunity allowed me to think about my audience even differently.
A performance or an installation.
I didn't know who these people were. As the comments were coming in, my friends were saying to me, you have some trolls. You have some people who are, responding to you in different ways, and it's not all positive. But then you also have some people who are trying to defend you as well.
An image that I could create of myself as a portrait.
I think that if you're offered an opportunity as an artist to put yourself out there and do something that you haven't done before, explain your references, explain your points of departure, make yourself visible, you should try it, see what happens.
Right. This piece actually originated in Seattle.
So this video goes on for about a half an hour, and at the end of it, it talks about my process, which is to make a drawing in whatever material. I think here I was using graphite. Usually I use pen and ink or whatever. And then with that drawing, I'm able to take it and then bring it to the Xerox machine. So I'm going to see if I can skip ahead a little bit.
In Toronto. So really, this is just the beginning of the process. I can then collage, I can cut out, I can add on, I can do different things to see what happens.
Mm-hmm. And for those of you who've used a Xerox machine, you know that you can play around with scale, you can play around with value.
Stephen said, I can't wait to see your work one day. What a creative mind.
Thanks. I enjoy making, I just enjoy making artwork, it's just, okay, so this is the darker one. You can see, with these newer Xerox copiers, it's inkjet, so it doesn't, you can see the difference in the black and white, like it's sort of like a yellower feel, And so now I'm gonna go.
So I continue to make Xeroxes with the interviewer of the drawing, but I just wanted to show you this because I was basically asked to explore my process in a live video. Make a drawing, take it to the Xerox machine, make several copies of it, and rework it.
Just a sort of bracketing exercise. It's not the final, it's just a kind of a test. See how it looks.
So I'm gonna pause this now,
Right.
and then I'll show you from that process what can come out of it. What comes out of it are several ways of thinking about installation. This was my thesis work from grad school, and what's included in my thesis are, you saw the copies. I take those copies and I figure out how to incorporate them into larger installations. This piece is called Self-Portrait with 12 Boxes, and you have Xeroxes wheat pasted to 4x8 panels in the back. There are 2 vinyl photographs hanging on the wall. There's a bunch of material that includes like discarded drawings, old drywall, all kinds of stuff in that pile in the back. And then you have this procession of donation boxes leading up to the front that contain different materials from my life and from my studio. And then the tile on the floor sort of pulls it all together in terms of staging. So I may make a drawing in front of a digital audience that doesn't really know where it's going to live, and that's what happened during the Facebook Live video, and that's what happens to me on a regular basis. But in the studio, it's my job to figure out, okay, once I make this drawing, how is it going to become a part of a larger installation that involves sculptural components and all kinds of things. So for this piece, this is the kind of example of how a drawing in any kind of material that moves through the Xerox machine can then become a part of a larger conversation within an installation. And this is a detail. The donation boxes were a great container, I think, for the information that I was trying to get at. I mean, the piece being called Self-Portrait with 12 Boxes was me trying to, I mean, some of you may have tried to create like what's called like a time capsule, you know, where you take a box or something and you put, you know, maybe you were younger, you were maybe 10 or 12 or something, and you put a bunch of stuff in your time capsule box, and then you know, dug a hole, buried it somewhere, and then the expectation is 15, 20, 25 years later, you go back to where you hid your time capsule, you open it up, and bam, there's all this information and all this wonderful sort of, all this wonderful memory contained inside of it. So for this piece, I was really, for my thesis and for sort of the capstone, many of you probably have your thesis exhibitions in the back of your head in terms of what you want to do. I mean, I knew that I wanted to try to speak to my lived experience as an artist from the moment I knew that I wanted to be one. So you see this donation box on the left that has water in it. One of the sculptural components in that box is a little clay sculpture that I made when I was in 5th grade. And then when I was in grad school, I made a digital 3D model of it, and sort of they sit in that box together. I'm always trying to have a conversation of like where I was as a young person making art and where I am now. And I think that that really talks to like past, present, and the connections that I'm trying to make between the two. And so the other boxes also have different relics and moments of my studio practice, whether it be old prints that I've made. I used a lot of sand at one point in my studio. There's resin, there's fabric, there's ink, a lot of drawing materials. So all of these things were a part of what I was contemplating. Here's another detail. Another detail. I think it's important to talk about pattern and repetition. Much of the feedback that I got when I was a student is that by using this process in which I was making a drawing, Xeroxing it, and tiling it multiple times on a surface, that there was something to be said about camouflage, about pattern, about wallpaper, wheat pasting. If any of you are interested in the multiple or the serial, I strongly encourage you to take printmaking here. It's a fantastic way to create multiple images. And I don't know if you have a risograph, but I'm sure you have a Xerox copier. I mean, it's a great way to kind of work through images really quickly and see how pattern and repetition change your images and how they evolve when you're able to kind of see how they look on a bigger surface area. I think that's, I mean, I would suggest it if you're interested in the multiple. So this kind of explains what I'm talking about. In this photo, you see that the Xerox copies kind of take over the entire wall space, right? I mean, I was interested in not only creating my own walls coming out, but using existing walls and covering them. And then I had several like painting objects and photographic objects within this installation. So this installation is called Blood Memory. The other thing that I think a lot about with my installations is lighting. Some of you may be working with large-scale pieces, and you're thinking, like, how do I light my work? The lighting in my work comes directly from my love of theater and staging, so I think about like spotlights and what can be accentuated and what I want to kind of fade into the background. And I also use gels. I use like colored red gels to add kind of texture and movement within the work as well. Actually, I can show you a better example of that here. This was my first solo show in New York, and you can see that the gels are acting a little differently here. The images that you see in this installation were originally created the same way you saw the copies made in the Facebook Live video. I was working, I had just graduated from Cooper. I had no money. I was totally broke. I was working an office job at Baruch College, which is this like business school on 23rd Street, for those of you who are familiar with New York. And I was kind of miserable, but I said to myself, okay, I don't have access to the print shop. How do I continue making my work as a person who's just out of school? And that's how I arrived at the Xerox copier. I was at the office job, I was sketching in my downtime, and I ran one of my sketches through the Xerox copier, and I was like, oh my God, this is a way for me to keep printing. It was a moment of ingenuity out of desperation, honestly, that I was able to say, okay, I might not have access to the print shop anymore, but I can use the Xerox copier to make my images. So what you see happening here, all of these were drawings. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way. All of these were drawings that I made in pen and ink that then became much larger. I blew them up. They were originally like notebook size, like sketchbook size or whatever. And then I took those drawings and I took them to a professional printer and I blew them up and I had them printed on Mylar, I had them printed on acetate. I collaged them into larger pieces that could be on the wall there and really hold some weight. I also knew that I wanted there to be layers, right? I wanted the viewer to be able to walk around the work, experience the work from different angles, be able to see how light moved through the work as well. This was a critical moment for me. I was right out of undergrad and I had my solo show through a fellowship at AIR Gallery. And I should mention, for those of you who are interested, AIR Gallery this is specifically, sorry guys, but this is for the women in the room. AIR Gallery is the first women's run, artist run space in the country. They have a fellowship opportunity for women identified artists that you can apply to. And that's how I got this opportunity. So for those of you who are thinking, I want to go to New York or be in New York for a limited amount of time, if you're interested in this opportunity, I say apply for it. You get professional development. You can't be in a program, so it would have to be after you graduate. But look this up online. It's really great. You get a mentor. My mentor was amazing. She helped me figure out all kinds of business practices, best practices. But the key was that I had this solo show at the end, and I was able to see my work in a gallery space outside of an academic institution, which I think is the first step in trying to visualize being a professional artist, right? Seeing your work outside of the school context is really important. So this is just a detail of that. So I showed you my thesis work while I was in grad school, which is the self-portrait piece, this piece. As I was mounting this piece, though, I had a professional opportunity that I could not turn down. And it was really crazy to try to do a museum show at the same time as I was trying to do my MFA thesis work, but I did it. And what I'm mentioning this because sometimes you will have decisions to make about your professional practice which will make you feel that you have no time. We're all trying to juggle family, relationships, personal lives, studio practice. I had so much going on at this time, but I'm just saying that you can do it. You can make it all work. So I'm going to show you this video, which is the teaser for the show that I was a part of, and then I'm going to show you a video of the work that I did for the exhibition. So hopefully we get this going. Okay, hopefully that woke some people up. No, this show was super exciting for me. The show traveled from sorry, let me see where I'm going here. The show traveled from the Brooklyn Museum, which just want to make sure I'm not losing my place here. Okay. This is the video I want to show you next. Okay, cool. The show traveled from where did it start? It started at the Brooklyn Museum, then it went to the Fowler in LA, and then after that it went to the Brooklyn Museum, and that's where it ended. And so to be a part of a traveling exhibition was really amazing. At the same time, I was also invited to create a site-specific installation before the show opened, and so this is... The title of the piece is called How Ghosts Sleep, Seattle. It's an installation in two primary parts. We have the canopies hanging from the ceiling. They're approximately 17 by 20, and then we also have the wallpaper. The drawings for the wallpaper and for the canopies started with a process of just drawing, and I'll just sketch that out in pen and ink on paper. Then what happens is that I'll Xerox that drawing and I'll build on top of it, again, just drawing on top of it, and I'll Xerox it again. In a way, it's a printmaking process for me to build up imagery that I can then translate into collage, I can then scan and play around with in Photoshop. So the drawings supplement my interest in sort of chaos and figuration and abstraction, but the grid sort of ties that all together. So I was fortunate enough to partner with an amazing designer, Lloydie Moronga, who was able to help me bring this grid to fruition. In thinking about the drawings that I wanted to bring to this project, I was really inspired by Afro Deco as a sort of motif and a template to work from, but then also an extension of that is just Art Deco period and the kind of balance that can be achieved through the grid. Wallpaper emerged as a way of bringing in design into the home and being a sort of very selective process that reflected class and interests, but I think also conceptually it has to do with covering. So if you think about wallpapering as a covering, as a way of masking, as a way in which you can change a space and really create an immersive environment, fabric can really do the same thing. And it is such a beautiful space and it's such an immense space, so I was thinking about how I could use the ceilings and canopies to sort of mask and disguise a lot of the hardware that's up there and changing the space that way. My mom is a fashion forecaster, and she actually went to FIT and has been making clothes and sewing and designing clothes since I can remember, and even before that. So she actually collaborated with me on constructing the canopies, and a photographic representation of her is also in the wallpaper as well. So in a way, it's autobiographical too. This installation is an homage to my mother, my grandmother, and the women who are part of my ancestral fabric as well. So a lot of the things that are here are images or thoughts or ideas that I've had for a very long time and that I think precede me. Aaron Douglas has been very important to me in this project in thinking about his contribution to an art movement that continues to come up in both subconscious and conscious ways in my work. So that is a sort of ghostly presence in my practice as well. So I think that the ghosts are both literal in some ways in terms of how I'm picturing things, but also it's very conceptual as well. I'm honored to be in proximity to so many amazing artists that are within the sculpture parks, so it's really a fantastic opportunity. And I hope that being an emerging artist amongst these more established artists, that it becomes a way in which the museum can continue to welcome younger artists into their midst in all of the locations. So you get a sense of the scale there. It was, that was a big project. I received that commission, let me think, when I got into grad school in 2013. I think it was the summer before I was going to school, is when we started the planning for that piece. Sorry, that's a different video. You can watch all these videos or not. Yeah, that piece was huge for me. And it opened the sort of opportunity up for me to do more wall-based work. This is a piece that I did for the Queens Museum. You know, the planning that it takes to do these large-scale works is totally worth it. I mean, I know that some of you probably are interested in working in public art, doing mural work, doing large-scale work. The planning that it takes, the collaborative effort that it takes is really so fulfilling. I know that it's hard sometimes to conceptualize taking a year or 2 or 3 or more to get something up and going. But when you see the fruits of your labor at the end, there's no feeling like that in the world. I'll talk about this wall a little bit. The show was called Queens International 2017. I'm sorry that I don't have any details of it right now, but the premise was that if you were a Queens-based artist, that you could apply for this opportunity and be in the show, but the show had, the work had to have something to do with Queens. So I chose for my point of inspiration, Louis Armstrong. And Louis has some really incredible collages. A lot of people don't know that Louis Armstrong was a visual artist. He made incredible, beautiful, thoughtful collages for I think it was either 30 or 40 years of his life, and those collages can be found at the at Queens College in their archive. I discovered that he made collages when I realized that his home was actually in Corona, Queens, and that I could go to his house. It had been turned into a museum, and that he actually used to install, like I do, his collages on the walls of his house. And so when I realized that Louis had this sort of parallel practice as a installation collage artist, I thought this is the perfect opportunity for me to respond to that. And so what I did is I created this wall that I showed you here, this wall. And what's great is that I moved, as you probably noticed, I work primarily in black and white, right? So this was I said, you know, there's no way I can do like some kind of homage to Louis in purely black and white. I mean, this guy had one of the most colorful careers ever. So I said, you know, this is for the first time I'm going to incorporate color Xeroxes. I'm going to take a leap of faith in myself and my practice and just go rainbow with it, you know, and really have some fun and bring some joy into the practice. I mean, a lot of the material that I deal with is pretty heavy. It has to do with autobiographical information, obviously, but within that, there's like racialized information, there's subjectivities around my political concerns. And so with this, I was able to use Louis as a point of departure for the project. And I was also able to invite my good friend, Oh, that's a little blurry. My good friend Abby Dobson, who's worked with like Kanye and Talib Kweli and some really great people to do some original songwriting for me and perform in front of the wall. She decided that she wanted to respond directly to Louis Armstrong's songs, and so she kind of did her own covers of some of the songs, and then she also did some original work as well. So from this project, I was able to really do some cool collaborative stuff. And her guitarist, Mangus, is so talented, and they performed in front of the wall 3 times. So we were able to get some active engagement around that, which is cool. The last project that I'll talk to you about, because I think I'm running, yes, okay. The last project that I'll talk to you about is this Coney Island art wall project. I was invited by Jeffrey Deitch, Jeffrey has worked with so many people. He's worked with Basquiat before he passed. He's worked with Jeff Koons. He had his own gallery. He was the director of MoCA in LA. He's a part of the art world in a real way. And so Jeffrey decided that he wanted to set up a sort of installation, public installation in Coney Island. How many of you have been to Coney Island before? Okay. I love Coney Island. Coney Island is one of my favorite places in the world. I think there's no place like it. There's no place like it. And it was destroyed, unfortunately, partially by Hurricane Sandy. So in the rebuilding effort, Jeffrey and some real estate people decided to go in on like a kind of property in Coney Island and say, let's bring artists in to kind of interact with the walls. My problem with this project was twofold. The community of Coney Island was recovering from Hurricane Sandy, and I felt that this project was a little bit of, we've heard the term gentrification, right? We're familiar with that. I felt like maybe there was something happening around that, but I said, you know what, I'm going to participate in this. But I said to him, I'll do it, but everything I do is going to be temporary, and if rain hits, it will all wash away. And he agreed to let me do it because I had some concerns about the project, and he agreed to let me do this. So you see those stickers, I love Coney Island. Those stickers were made by an artist from Coney Island. Her name is Lola Starr. She's a performance artist and does so much community work in Coney. And so I went and bought a bunch of her bumper stickers. And then I also, it was so hot, it was in the middle of summer, but it was really fun because I was having people come up to me and interact with me. And so moving out of all of the color work that I did on the Louis Armstrong piece, I decided to stick with that vibrancy for this piece because Coney Island is so vibrant. And I used to live very close to the area off of the D train a couple of stops away. So I would visit often and take photos there and draw on the, by the water and all these things. So in a very diaristic way, with a very diaristic approach, I took all of the material that I made as an artist, sort of sketching and engaging with Coney, and I took those and I did my Xerox thing once again. And I took those drawings and I Xeroxed them and I integrated them into the language of the already existing work that Lola had mounted to save Coney Island in the face of gentrification and real estate development because of what happened with Hurricane Sandy. I'm mentioning this because some of you really have some issues that are coming up in your practice that have to do with art and activism. Okay, the students that I was talking to this morning, some of them are really invested in climate change. Some of them are, one of them was working with a student with disabilities. I know several of you are working in arts education, okay? So if you find that you have an issue that you're really trying to grapple with, you can use your art as activism, obviously, in really direct ways. And so this is what I thought I would do for this piece. So this was the result. It was a very colorful, vibrant wall that I wanted people to be able to bring their own content too, so if they had stickers or whatever, they could put them on the wall as well. And there was also sort of there was a lot of engagement around the wall. There were picnic tables eventually set up and all different things. But you can go to the website. Let me see, Coney Art Walls. It's really fun. You can go to the website and see all of the work in person. See how fun that is? And most of these artists are world-renowned. I mean, these guys, I was incredibly honored to be in conversation with these people. I mean, these are graffiti artists and street artists who do work across the globe. And so for me to be in that conversation after Jeffrey saw my work at the Queens Museum, I felt really honored to be a contemporary artist in the mix with street artists and graffiti artists, and to open up that conversation around my work as well, right? Every year it changes too, so that's really great about it. I'm also in a collective called Black Women Artists for Black Lives Matter. If you're interested, you can take a look at the work that we do in your own time. But this is another way in which I've used my art and activism and my performance to work collaboratively with other artists to tackle subject matter that's really important to me. We have shown internationally. We've shown at the New Museum. We've shown at the Tate in Great Britain. We've shown in Texas. I think we're doing something soon in, where is it? Where are we doing? We're going to be doing some work in South Africa, I think. We've done work in California. So anyway, this is an ongoing piece, this group that I'm in. So, yeah, let me see what else I'm not sure if I missed anything. But at this point, let me look at my little PowerPoint. Oh, okay. I will say that I went to Georgetown, Seattle to do, Georgetown is really cool. I went to Georgetown to do a show called Rage Wave. And so I'm taking the work that I made for Rage Wave, and I am going to the next show that I have is a solo show in Toronto, in Canada, where I'm going to be doing a second iteration of the show that I did in Georgetown. So. It's just like really, I love being like really expansive and open about my practice and thinking about all the different ways I can use site specificity, scale, repetition, Xerox, et cetera, to tackle, whatever imagery I'm making that's both in my sketchbook or more intentional about making a discrete object. All of it can fold and collapse back into anything that I want. The possibilities are endless in that way. So I feel that my practice is really generative. I can, if someone asks me to do a wall, I can do a wall, but right currently I'm making like drawings that I want to turn into objects. So I make objects and sculptural pieces as well. But I'm saying all of this to tell you that an interdisciplinary approach to making can really open up a lot of potentials. If you're feeling stuck around a discipline, trying out something new can open up the conversation around your work. So I'm more than willing to use the last 15 minutes to answer any questions that you have. You can ask me whatever you want, and I will try my best to answer it. But thank you for listening. Yes? That's a really good question. Her question was, how did you make those connections to be able to get your opportunities? A lot of hard work and a lot of luck, I think, maybe. Combination. I think the best thing to say about that is that, let me just pick an image that I can keep up for a while. I didn't show you these, so I'll keep these up. The best thing the best way to answer that question is like, you really just need to put yourself out there. I'm not sure what it's like. My lived experience has been that I was in New York, right? And so I went to school in the city. The emphasis of my education after I graduated, the expectation, the emphasis was on being an artist. That's what I went to school for. So we said to ourselves after we graduated, okay, the priority is to get a studio, even if we're like dirt poor, to get a studio to work in and share our resources as peers and friends and make it work. And then invite curators and friends into the space for studio visits, and go to shows and openings, meet with gallerists that were interesting, put yourself out there, use travel and opportunities as a way to make those connections as well. And so as a young artist, after my fellowship that I told you about, I was really lucky to meet and be friends with some really great curators who were both independent and working for institutions that believed in me and believed in my work. And independent curators are kind of like artists. They're trying to make a lot of things happen without a lot of money, you know, without a lot of support, you know. And so I worked with curator friends. And I just really tried to put my work out there. I was applying to a lot of stuff. I got a lot of denials, a lot of rejections, but some things did work out. And then I also worked as a nonprofit arts administrator, where I was the marketing and what was it? Marketing and communications manager. And so because I was in that role, I was also corresponding with a lot of artists as well and building community that way and doing studio visits too. So I really just put myself in a position where I was constantly interfacing with people that were doing similar work. And then we're all coming up together, actually. Like 10 years later, some of these people are, I mean, my friend just got hired as an assistant curator at the Whitney, which is huge, you know. So we're all kind of trying to do this work together and help each other out. So I just say, like, make friends, make friends who are working as hard as you are, and put yourself in a position to meet the right people that will help you out. Yeah. Other questions? Any questions? It can be about anything, really. Yes? Yes, I'm glad that you asked, actually. It doesn't seem like it, but I teach in the printmaking department at CCA. I'm so, like, not a traditional printmaker that to be teaching in a very traditional program. I should have had some slides of that, but yes, I teach lithography, which is super intense, and I love it. I think I have a print, yeah. This is the first litho on the left. This is the first layer is touche, and the second layer is crayon, that I made when I was an undergrad. And I fell in love with lithography, and now that I'm teaching it, I mean, I see why. But being out of the shop, because I couldn't financially afford it as a kind of young 20-something right out of school, is why I wasn't working in litho for so long. So when I was able to afford to get back into the shop, I started printing again. I like monotypes, I like collagraphs, I like, you know, sort of more, what do I want to say, one-to-one processes as well. But litho slows me down, yeah. Litho definitely, and I love working on the stone. But I teach intro to print too, so I do it all, and I love it all. But in terms of my practice, I mostly work with, at this point, I'm mostly doing monotypes. Yeah. I'm sorry if that's like flying over the heads of people. Some of the printmaking jargon is, you need kind of like a dictionary to define all of these things. But do people know what I'm talking about? Monotype? No? Who's saying no? Anyone? Okay, a monotype is just, how do I explain this? There's so many different ways you can do it, but simply put, you can take the printmaking ink and use any tool, a brayer, a brush, or whatever, and create your image on a surface like Plexi, and put your paper down and run that through the press, and it's a one-to-one impression. Yeah. Other questions? Yes, in the back. Well, I mentioned that a large part of that area had been destroyed by Hurricane Sandy, and the interests of the developers were, I think, not about repairing what was lost, but about like a bit of displacement, a bit of like economic displacement. I mean, you have like Mark Wahlberg opening up a burger spot, you know? It's like, who wants to pay $16 for a burger, you know? That kind of thing. So I think conceptually I was thinking of the washing away of the paper, which it did eventually, I would say, halfway through the summer start to fall apart. Jeffrey did call me and asked me to repair some of it, and I said no. But that was my response. Yeah, about the water. Does that make sense? It still doesn't make sense? Okay. When water destroys a property, greedy people, sometimes I feel greedy people take advantage of the repair aspect to displace folks who are already economically disadvantaged. So rather than repair what was there and keep it at the same economic level so that people who are there can afford to stay, the developers price everything up when they repair stuff, right? So they say, okay, I'm going to do a luxury condo where a mom and pop store used to be, okay? So in response to that, I said, well, then if you're paying me for this wall, my wall's not going to be permanent. It's going to wash away. Just like some of the businesses and some of the people who've been just displaced by economic development have been here. Okay, so does that make more sense? Okay. Other questions? Yes?
Have you done any outdoor installations outside of the community that you've been involved in? So outside of like coming out, you have experience with, you're embedded in, you know, culture, community, people, welcome in that sense. But have you done anything outside of the spaces that you've been comfortable with? And what are the ways that, in terms of advice, you make those connections with communities that are you like buy capital with those communities or integrate yourself into those?
Yeah, that's hard. I think that when I'm invited to do site-specific installations in galleries, that's where it gets tricky. So when I went to Georgetown, for example, I hadn't been to Georgetown. It's the oldest the oldest area of southern of that part of Seattle. I think it was like the industrial like train. The people who worked on the trains used to work down there, you know. So like I had no idea. The building that I showed the work in was very old and I think kind of haunted, honestly. And I was installing in this attic space, and people were looking at me like I was crazy. They were like, "What are you doing here?" And it's a very small kind of place. And so when I have to deal with that, usually I just go to the bar and make some friends, you know, and like talk to people and see what the history is and get those anecdotes and get those stories, because people will open up, and I walk around, you know. I do a lot of walking, so I'll walk around and I'll make myself visible. I try to arrive in the space or the place several days before the installation has to start, just to get to know people and have those conversations. And I do my research in advance too. So I'm doing that for Toronto. I've never been to Toronto, so I'm trying to do that planning now before I arrive in January. It's very different. I mean, I also try to do like be very intentional about scheduling community programming during the run of my show. So in Georgetown, we had like a poetry reading event where local poets could respond to my work or not. but just do a reading, and facilitate some kind of local engagement within the space of the work. And that's what I'm doing in Toronto too. I'm working with their public education programmer for the gallery to do some outreach in that sense. So that's very important to me. I used to direct a public art program, so doing that work and making those connections is really important. Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Anyone? All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.